mamma sa till mig att hon skulle köpa mig en dockig gumma om jag är snäll. Men tala icke för henne. Jag har en fästman, han köper hon mig icke en dockig gumma.
Hello, who are you?
Do you want to know what that means?
I was going to ask you, but...
I thought that was coming next.
Well, I'm Paul.
I'm Mary.
And Mary was singing a song that she learned from her Swedish grandfather when she was just a little tyke.
Yeah.
And he even taught her what it means. What does it mean?
Means... My mother told me that she would buy me a rubber dolly if I were good. So don't you tell her I've got a feller, or she won't buy me no rubber dolly. Yeah. One of the few tunes I learned from my grandpa. But I did get a lot of Swedish flavor in our Swedish Christmas Eves that we celebrated with his siblings and families, eating great Swedish food like dip in the kettle and lutefisk, cardamom rolls, and figgy cake. Was a wonderful childhood.
I also had Swedish food at Christmas time. My mother was the daughter of Swedish immigrants. Unfortunately, they never taught her how to speak Swedish because they wanted their kids to be Americans. So the only time she heard Swedish was when they didn't want her to know what they were saying. So that's how that goes. But anyway, we are here at our cabin east of Brainerd, Minnesota. And instead of being at Høstfest this year, we're going to do a little virtual, thing for you and tell you a little bit about our lives here. And we're going to start out by showing you a slideshow with some narration of things that we've been doing since we moved up here. How many years ago?
38.
38 years ago.
1982.
So,
in January.
In January, that's right. So, let's see how this goes. Enjoy the show.
Paul and I met at a log cabin building class. Here you see one of our anniversary pictures in front of a sauna we built sometime early on.
Those are logs that we cut ourselves and hand peeled every one of them, so we have the scars to prove it.
My grandpa, that taught me the cute little song, was so proud he wanted to build one more cabin before he was gone, so we gave him the opportunity, and he loved it, every log of it.
Here's a picture of Mary scribing two logs together. That's how they're fitted closely. You have to cut them out with a chainsaw.
This is our original 16 by 24 cabin that we moved into after we married. Of course, we put the roof on and the windows in first before we moved up.
Mary and I were, for several years, building log cabins for a living. This shows you our work site when we were building a cabin for a resort on Whitefish Lake. And after we finished putting it together here, we'd put it on a truck and bring it up and put it back together there.
This is what our cabin looks like in the fall. Beautiful colors of Minnesota autumn.
Here's the way our cabin looks in the winter time. If you remember from the earlier segment, I mentioned that we moved up here in January of 1982.
We had to bring everything in on a toboggan that we were going to use to live the whole winter. It was quite a feat. Here I am knitting a Norwegian-style mitten at a friend's cabin on the north shore of Lake Superior. I'm never far from my knitting bag since my grandma of German heritage taught me to knit when I was 7 years old. I've knit a lot of mittens, and a lot of hats. And Paul thinks there's something wrong with me if I'm not knitting in the car, so I just keep on knitting.
For the last several years, Mary's been selling quite a bit on Etsy, so if you're interested in her stuff, look her up. I've always been interested in the handcrafting arts. As a young man, I learned the stained glass craft and worked in a studio in Minneapolis. After we moved up to Brainerd, I continued making and selling stained glass pieces for a while. Here are some examples of my work. In 1995, I received a folk arts apprenticeship grant from the Minnesota State Arts Board, studying and building resonant stringed violins that are often played in the Nordic countries. These are violins that have sympathetic strings that run under the fingerboard besides the playing strings. Since then, I've built several and have sold several, and they're kind of scattered all around the world right now. Sometimes I'm lucky enough to still have a violin that I've built that I can play.
Here I am knitting at one of my first Høstfest knitting booths. We started in 1987, and you can tell it was a long time ago by looking at the color of my hair.
I mostly remember that first year at the Høstfest in Minot because the Minnesota Twins won their first World Series that year, and we drove our 1964 Plymouth Valiant all the way to Minot from Brainerd, and after getting all packed up on Sunday to go home, the old Valiant wouldn't start in the parking lot, so I whacked the starter with a hammer and we drove all the way home without turning the engine off once. In 2000, Mary and I founded a Scandinavian folk music festival in Nisswa, Minnesota, called Nisswa-stämman. 20 years later, it's turned into a really successful event, attracting lots of musicians from the USA and the Nordic countries. It starts with a big concert on Friday night. Then on Saturday morning, there's a musicians parade heading down the main street of Nisswa to the Pioneer Village, where we all gather together to play what they call an allspel. Here's a shot of that. There's lots of jamming on the grounds, or as the Swedes say, buskspel. There's dancing next to the main stage. Here's one of the big venues called the Pine Grove Stage. Of course, there's a smorgasbord at night and lots of dancing during the evening afterwards. Here's our group called School Club Spelmanslag that was formed in 1991 in the Brainerd area.
We've made several recordings of Scandinavian gammeldans music, waltz, schottisch, and polka.
And our group called Skol Music was formed at the same time out of that larger group.
Here we are lined up in front of Grandpa's old log cabin. We're raring to go.
That shot was a promo shot for our third recording, which was called Scandinavian Potluck, and our last recording was mostly Norwegian music.
Paul and I started going out and doing programs for kids in grade schools about 30 years ago. Can you believe it? We have a lot of fun talking music, teaching dancing, etc. We also made a recording of Scandinavian folk songs. We sang in Swedish, Norwegian, and English.
In 1995, Skol Music started playing at Høstfest, and this is a shot from Oslo Hall in 1998.
In 1999, we started working with Høstfest in the schools, taking our kids' program to Minot schools and their environs. It's been a lot of fun. We're really glad to be out there.
In 2008, Art Bjorngjeld and Shar Bostrom joined our group, and we became Skol Music Grande, and we've been performing that way ever since. And that's it, folks.
Ha det så bra!
Welcome back from our brief but slightly spectacular slideshow.
Now it's time for the musicians to walk into our festival, and traditionally in Scandinavia, oftentimes musicians will walk out to the edge of town and they'll march in playing traditional walking tunes, and the people of the community will walk out of their houses realizing it's time to go to the festival. They'll march in making a mini parade, and I think if you listen carefully, you'll find that there's a musician who's out at the edge of our little community here waiting to walk in and play music.
And when we usually do this for the kids, that's me, but since we're doing this virtually, it can be both of us. So here we come.
Now we're going to do an old Scandinavian Vaudeville tune. It tells a story that happened, I'm sure, to a lot of our ancestors coming from anywhere, where the young man would come to the United States or America, if it wasn't the United States yet, and he'd make a little money, and then he'd send for his wife and children or his girlfriend, and they'd get together and start a life in the United States together. It's called Hello, Wisconsin. On a little farm in Sweden, Miss Hilda Hansson one day sold all the pigs, horses and rigs, packed up and sailed away. When in old New York she landed, they asked her, "Are you alone?" She answered, "No, I've got a beau, just let me telephone." Hello, Wisconsin, have you seen my Janne Jansson? Just tell him his Hilda Hansson just got off the boat by Yemeni. How she wants him, you know Jan Jansson, 'cause he's over 6 feet high. He'll jump for joy when he hears I've come, 'cause my Janne boy gonna change my name from Hansson to Jansson. So Wisconsin, goodbye. Well, when she landed in Wisconsin, her Janne Jansson was there. Jan in his pride made her his bride. Oh, what a happy pair. The years have showered them with blessings, two little babies so high. When shadows creep, they fall asleep, hearing this lullaby.
La, da, da.
Hello, Wisconsin, have you seen my Janne Jansson? Just tell him his Hilda Hansson just got off the boat by Yemeni. How she wants him, you know Jan Jansson, 'cause he's over 6 feet high. He'll jump for joy when he hears I've come, 'cause my Janne boy gonna change my name from Hansson to Jansson. So Wisconsin, goodbye.
So you've heard the song of Hilda Hansson and Jan Jansson, and this tune tells a little bit about after she got to Wisconsin and met Jan Jansson, and it's all true, every word of it. Well, we had the fancy party at the hall the other day. We had a jolly time, that's what all the people say. And all the folks from miles around come dressed up in their best to Jan Jansson and Miss Hilda Hansson's wedding. There
was Charlie Anderson and Emil Anderson and Gustav Anderson and Carl Anderson and Per Anderson and Hjalmar Anderson and Arnie Anderson was there too.
Well, the bride, she looked so lovely, 'cause she was dressed in white. Her hair was trimmed with roses, her face that smiled so bright. And when the pastor in quiz said, "Du är Jan Jansson's wife," then we all jumped up and sang at Jansson's wedding.
There was Charlie Peterson and Emil Peterson and Gustav Peterson and Carl Peterson and Per Peterson and Hjalmar Peterson and Peter Peterson was there too.
Well, we had a lot to eat that night. The supper, it was fine. With knäckebröd, lutefisk I ate most all the time. With lingonås och sylta och kaffe och sockerbit. Ja, that's what we had to eat at Jansson's wedding.
There was Charlie Larsson and Emil Larsson and Gustav Larsson and Carl Larsson, Per Larsson and Hjalmar Larsson, and Lars Larsson was there too.
Well, I forgot the words to the next verse.
We played a lot of games.
Well, we played a lot of games that night, and yeah, we sure had fun. The girls, they were so jolly, I kissed most every one. My wife, she took me by the ear, said,
"That's enough for you."
but I never will forget Jan Jansson's wedding.
There was Charlie Svensson and Emil Svensson and Gustav Svensson and Carl Svensson and Per Svensson and Hjalmar Svensson.
Sven Svensson was there too. Well, they had the case of whiskey and they had a keg of beer. And when all that was slut, they went out and got some more. The bride, she just drank aquavit and Jonsson, he drank beer. And the rest of us got just a tiny bit looped at Jansson's wedding.
There was Charlie Olsen and Emil Olsen and Gustav Olsen and Carl Olsen and Per Olsen and Hjalmar Olsen and Ole Olsen was there too.
Then on Sunday morning, we all was sick in bed. We drank for mycket brännvin, that's what the pastor said. But everybody keeps talking about what a jolly time we had. Yeah, you bet your life we did at Jansson's wedding.
There was Charlie Eriksson and Emil Eriksson and Gustav Eriksson and Carl Eriksson and Per Eriksson and Hjalmar Eriksson and Eric Eriksson was there too.
We're going to start out our fiddle set with a tune written by our friend Morten Høyrup, who lives in Copenhagen, Denmark. And this is a tune that he wrote for his wife, Ingela.
We met Morten at Høstfest one year, didn't we? The first year he and Harald Haugard were there.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that was a long time ago.
It was, there's a lot of water over the dam. So here we go with Ingela's Waltz. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. now I'm going to play a tune for you. We are going to play a tune for you that I learned from a guy named Archie Teigen, a Norwegian American who lived in Brainerd, Minnesota. He was a heavy equipment operator, traveled all over the United States, and also a folk musician. He played the Hardanger fiddle and the accordion. And he basically Americanized the Hardanger fiddle by playing standard kind of old-time fiddle tunes with it. And this tune he called Ellen's Polka, but since we learned it from Archie, we call it Archie's Polka. And we've found out in 1 year that we were in Norway that they actually, in Telemark, they call this the Stretch Pants Polka. Not quite sure why. Do we know why?
Very lively.
1, 2, 3, 4. In 1995, our group called Skålklubb Spelmanslag visited Sweden and Norway and made a musical tour around. And one of the places, one of our stops was in Småland, which is the county where Mary has ancestors. We stayed at a sort of a bed and breakfast historic place, youth hostel, in a place called Koru, and this was all arranged for us by a friend that Mary and I had met earlier, whose name is Magnus Gustafsson, and he is a great folk musician, musicologist, has written several books on subjects like Polska, and he taught us, all of our group, this tune called Al Capone's Waltz, which is a tune they play in Småland. And it has a long story which I won't go into because I'm talking too much already. But it's one of those experiences we'll all remember. So here comes Al Capone's Waltz. Now we're going to play a tune written by Arnie Anderson, who's a member of our group called Skål Music, and he's written several tunes for us over the years. This is one of my favorites. It's called the Tuesday Morning Waltz.
We're going to do one of the most popular Scandinavian old-time dance tunes ever. It's called Johan på Snippen, and it's about this guy on the street corner who buys a new accordion, and he plays on the street corner all night long, and the girls and the guys come out and dance. They know all the tempi to all the tunes, and they have a great time all night long, and Johan plays so much that his shirt gets wet, and etc.
And etc.
Johan på Snippen har köpt sig klaver med Horti och Marsa och Filfanet. Nu är det dans varje låt och kär, så på bönen möter går och ingen mer. När Johan tar klöver och väljer sina händer, jättar i skatter så det lyser sina tänder. När han drar på väljen en drag, sen blir det jazzigt till ljusnande dag. Alla våra piggar liksom alla våra drängar känner melodier liksom Dattendalens fänger. Johan han spelar så tjottan blir våld, lägger sin kaliber en dragspelare slår. Och lågar på Pelle och Dansen går till dammslott, till stoppen börjar gala. Tack ska du ha för du spelar så bra. Då hissar vi Johan, hurra, hurra, hurra.
Okay, so you heard Johan på snippen, and now you're going to hear one called Carrie Poyat Polka. And it's a Finnish polka. I'm not really sure where we learned it, probably from a recording somewhere. And I still remember the time we were in Ishpeming, Michigan, playing it at a Elks Club, and this old guy came up to us afterwards, and he said, you know, that was the best polka I ever heard. He probably said that after every polka he ever heard.
That was fun.
I thought so too.
I hope you enjoyed as much as we did this little snippet of our lives and our music. And we are looking forward to seeing you at Høstfest 2021.
Goodbye now.
Bye.
In 1995, our group called Skål Club Spelmanslag visited Sweden and Norway. Mary Abendroth,
Oh.
I want you to sing the song that your grandfather taught you in Swedish. Okay, go ahead.
Dukki gumma. Hmm?
Dukki gumma.
Dukki gumma. How does it go?
What, you don't know?
Well, it's been a while.
It goes da 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 da.
Min mamma sa det mig att hon skulle gå upp med mig. En dukki gumma om jag är snäll. Men tala icke om för henne. Han var en fästman. Han köpte hon mig icke en dukki gumma. My mother told me that she would buy me a rubber dolly if I were good. Then don't you tell her I've got a feller, or she won't buy me a rubber dolly. Son.
Oh, that's nice.